Hello, 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 beautiful people of the internet. I am Iago Pradis, and I wanted to go over how I made the orchestral music for a post that I made recently on Instagram. If you haven't seen it, please go check it out. That'd be really cool. But essentially, I made a little trailer for this YouTube channel and the kinds of stuff that I wanted to start posting. And in the background, I made an orchestral short, it was like less than a minute long, little piece to accompany it, to make it sound all epic and like it was a Marvel movie or something. And today I wanted to go over how I made that. It's fairly simple. I just wanted to go over like some of the things that I had in mind when I was making it, some of the different mixing techniques that I would apply in orchestral music that I wouldn't necessarily do in some other types of music, and just my general workflow. So here we go. Let's mix music. So here's the project. It's only 31 channels. It's not a big behemoth of anything. Here's what the music itself sounds like from start to finish. Alright, so there you have it. That's what we got going on. I've laid it out here in a way where it's pretty easy to see what everything's divided up into. So, to get an idea of where I had the inspiration for any of this in the first place, let me pull up one of my own songs. So this is a song from my latest album called Theory of Everything. It's called Like Wonder. I'll go ahead and skip to the part where this main orchestral idea starts. So that's the main musical idea behind all of this. The song itself is in 7/4, which I like because you can kind of alternate how you feel that. You can either do like a batch of 3. This is not the number 3. I can't do a 3 with my left hand. Anyway, a batch of 3, or a batch of 4, or you could do a batch of 4 and then a batch of 3, or you could do some crazy stuff like a batch of 2 and a batch of 5. It just gives you a good amount of variety there to mess around with when it comes to like your rhythms and stuff. So for the melody here, this is what the instruments who are carrying the melody sound like. So I just repeated that throughout the song. A couple different layers here. Some higher brass. Some strings, some staccato strings, this I believe is pizzicato. Nope, still staccato. This is pizzicato. So that's all together what's making up this main melody. So because this was more of a background thing, I didn't try to go super complex, because the original melody from the song Like Wonder was a little bit more complex. It was a little bit more varied, played around with some dissonance more. And because it was in the background and it was more of an accompaniment to another video, I wanted it to be more simple. So I just repeated this one thing, like copy pasted it over and over again. Here we got the more sustained orchestra in the background. Starting off, there's the brass. Here we got more brass. Whew. Not what I thought it was. It's doing the same thing, just like the top line of it. Here's some strings. They're carrying like the main tonic note of each chord. Halfway through, to make it a little bit beefier, I added an organ. I believe it's just doing the same chords as the brass over here. And here's some woodwinds. So that's all together, all the sustained orchestra. I'll go ahead and play them all at the same time. A big player in all this is the brass. Obviously, you can hear it very clearly over the top. So something that I've learned about brass, which has been pretty helpful for me to get them to stick through an orchestral mix a bit more, is really focusing on this like 7K plus range. This is where a lot of the brightness is in all of your sounds, but with brass especially, it gives it this metallic-y, glistening shine, which sounds very like regal. It sounds very present, very like long live the queen kind of. I'll play it in context without the EQ just to show exactly what I'm talking about. So this is without the EQ. And now I'll add it in. So that's a technique that I found that really helps me to be able to use my brass the way that I want it to. Usually when I have like big, loud brass, that's when I want it to stick out more like this. Softer brass is a different story. That's a different type of mixing altogether. But for this, I wanted it to be like very bright, very like, I'm here. We are in the king's court. We're playing for royalty right now. Me, I'm the royalty. So, yeah, that's all of the sustained orchestra. Now, one of the biggest necessities here for this piece specifically is this choir. I'm using the Jacob Collier choir for contact. Let me go ahead and mute it so you can hear what it sounds like. Oh, it's already muted. Here you go. And it just sits neatly over top of everything. I'm going to play the whole song together. and I'll turn off the choir, and then I'll turn it back on for you to hear the difference. Very delicate, right on top. Without it. With it. For me, once I added this in, it brought it all together. I cannot rant and rave about the Jacob Collier audience choir enough. It's free. If you have Contact Player, which is also free. If you're looking for just like a free, very, very good quality choir, this is like a very large choir. This isn't a small, 10 to 15 person choir. This is like 100,000 voices altogether. And it's all one big wash of the human voice. I think it's beautiful. The next thing here is the bass section of the orchestra. All of this is just the low sustained tones or some driving, more like staccato type of strings. And some brass. So this is the brass by itself. It's pretty simple. It's just a bass line. Strings doing the same thing. And here we got some staccato strings. Their velocity here is alternating a little bit. You see it goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Just to give it some movement, some dynamics. It really helps fill up the low end, helps give it a little bit of movement, and it's clean. It's not all over the place. Just a simple little pulse. Here's without it. Here's with it. If you have headphones, you can feel it a little bit more. It just adds to that warmth, gives it some gravitas, if you know what I'm saying. And here, just to fill up the low end as much as I could, I added a Serum patch with some distortion on it from Sausage Fattener here. And it's just a simple sine wave. I don't think there are even any effects on it. No, it's just really simple. Technically, to have gotten cleaner and avoid that little pop at the beginning, just adding a little bit of attack here, so it's not starting automatically all the way at the fullest amount. There you go. Just a clean low end addition to support the bass section of the orchestra and to fill it up in your ears. So now here's the percussion. Here's all the percussion. So the percussion here separates this 7/4 into almost like a 3/4 and then a 4/4. And it's done mainly with this drum loop here. The Cerebrus pack on Splice is phenomenal for this style of orchestral drums, like big, impactful orchestral drums. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's what that one's doing. This is just a little flammy kind of. Just put some cathedral reverb on it to like really wash it out. EQ'd it so it stuck through and was a little bit brighter in the mix. For these drums, let me go back to these real quick. For these drums right here, I took out all of this low end stuff. Let me see. If I add it back in, you'll see how much there is. I personally love that sound. When I listen to it on its own, it's amazing. The reason I cut it out, though, is because there's all this stuff going on here without that cut. But then there's also all this stuff going on here. All of this sub 100 kind of stuff. Same here with the synthesizer bass. I don't have an EQ there. Let me put it on. Here you go. So you see, there's a lot of low-end information that would be clashing here, so one of them has to go. And I decided, because of what this was used for, the spaces that people were probably going to be listening to this, which was mainly going to be on like Instagram and TikTok and stuff, it was more important to have the melodic aspect there rather than the drums. Sometimes you have to think about sacrificing certain things when you're playing acoustically, like in an orchestral setting. This kind of stuff doesn't really matter. However, when you're making things digitally like this, if you have too much overlapping frequencies, especially in this like low end area, this is where it gets like really muddy, makes it very unclear what specifically is going on. So here, just an orchestral crash sweep from a Cashmere pack. If I really wanted to clean this up more, maybe this could have been reduced. Oh. If I really wanted to clean this up more, then maybe this low end could have been reduced a little bit more. Because what I was just saying about the drums clashing with the low end of the bass, that can still apply to random things like this, where there's just this low end stuff that isn't really even like the main meat of the sound that you're trying to get from it. It's just like this leftover rumble. You're gonna get a lot of this with like normal like recordings of real life things, because they're in real life there are a ton more frequencies than like when you fine tune it in like electronically. This is basically like photoshopping a sound versus no filtering it. You know, this is organic, this is natural. No BBL on this one. Versus something like, let me see. I missed the rage. Anyway, versus a crash like this. All of these guys, if you go into the EQs, you see how there's like barely any of this stuff going on compared to here? Both of them are crashes. Both of them are really like you're wanting them for this sound, like the higher end. But one is more tailored because it's electronically produced or already like curated in some way. It's already edited and cleaned up. Here, this is just another Cashmere drum loop. It's a snare. The specific timing of it, I didn't chop this up or anything because for this sort of background percussive element, the exact timing of it I felt wasn't as important as these main drums that were carrying it. So this guy could just be a cool little decorative thing in the background to add some high end to the percussion. Whereas these, it was more important for me for them to be the driving force of the rhythm itself so that you could know how am I meant to feel this section out. What is this? These are just some toms that I like repitched every once in a while. Yeah, here you go. These are some toms that I repitched to follow the pitch of the bass line. And this is just like an extra element to like accentuate the downbeat. So altogether, all these things make up the percussion. I'll play this one more time. The last part is some decorative little impacts going on. These are both some Virtual Riot impacts from his first sample pack on Splice, which I would highly, highly, highly recommend. I've been using these impacts for forever because I think they're so good. This is just what it sounds like. Very minimal EQing going on these. This one doesn't have any EQing. And I just scattered them throughout, doing the same thing. And then finally, this last tiny little guy right here is from one of my songs called Introduction to Self. And it's just the tail end of the song to give it like a tonal atmosphere. Just added some Valhalla reverb to it. Messed with the reverb. I believe that I made this reverb myself. Just messing around with it to get a good tone that I liked. And so yeah, all of it together, the entire song now from beginning to end, sounds like this. So that's all of the pieces together. There are some general notes that I would want to say when you're composing anything that has an orchestral element in it. For me personally, I get really picky about things sounding natural. I don't think people generally have to get super picky about it, but for me, I prefer that if I'm going to be using something with acoustic instruments and that is based off of a real life thing like an orchestra, I want it to sound as realistic as possible. And this comes down to a couple things. This comes down to sound selection, mix down, and the specific instrumentation, both the parts that you write for the instruments and the instruments themselves that you choose. So for me, I tend to try and replicate orchestras fairly realistically, where we have a bit of everything going on. I don't have a big woodwind section going on, really. This is just flutes. But everything else, as far as the different parts that are being played by brass, either as sustained chords or as some higher up melodies, and realistically what a choir might be doing, things like this, I try to keep it in mind. At the very least, something here that I reference every once in a while, even if I choose to do something a little different. But being very intentional about what each section is doing. So instead of trying to cram, for example, this brass melody with these brass chords, and having them all just in one MIDI file, separating them out so that you get the tonality of one, with the melodic carrying of another. And this one's tone, for example, just right here, like this one's tone is also a little bit softer. It's not as bright and as gritty as this. Because the point of it isn't for this guy to be a main character, it's for him to be part of a greater whole. Whereas, you know, for these guys, this the chord brass, he is kind of a main character. You want him to shine through distinctly to get this very, like, this is a hype trailer for a movie kind of feeling. Which is also what I was talking about at the beginning, about trying to accentuate this part to get it to stick out over the rest of the mix. I would highly recommend, like, doing some research. I'm not, like, as knowledgeable about this as many people are, but I have, like, a general idea and feel for what the different parts of an orchestra are comprised of, what they are usually used for, because these are, like, tried and true methods for certain instruments to be used for certain components, like a melody, versus some instruments are used as like a chord basis for the song. Some are more movement based, some are more stagnant, they stay the same. I would definitely recommend just like looking up these things on YouTube or just the internet in general, at the very least, to understand why these things have been used in certain ways for so long. I'm not saying you have to do it like that, but it's at least to like get you thinking about like the intentionality of instrument usage and the usage of certain notes or articulations and techniques if you're trying to do something orchestral. If you're able to get like a well-rounded understanding of like what real people would be doing in an orchestra, I think that it also helps you get into that world, into that zone a little bit more. And then you can play around with it in a way that is specifically curated to the idea you have in your head. It's just easier instead. And I say this as opposed to just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. I used to do this thing where I would just take like this ginormous chord stack in MIDI and I would just copy and paste it into like every instrument. Like the choir would have the same giant chord stack as brass, as would woodwinds, as would strings. Everything would have just like a ginormous chord stack. And so instead just thinking about like minimizing it in a way where you can get the maximum sound possible with like the least amount of copy and pasting a giant sound, you know, it helps clean it up. It helps give it a more organic feeling. And it also gets you more in tune with being intentional about the music itself. There are some times that ginormous chord stacks are fun and play a great role. Just kind of like feel it out. Try different things, balance it out, find a happy medium, and have fun. The mastering is super, super minimal. It's just like a little EQing here to bring out the high end and to bring out the low end a little bit more. And then a limiter, just stopping it at 0. Normally I wouldn't do this. I would have it like a little bit lower here. Or I would reduce the master over here. But because this was just for, this wasn't going on streaming platforms, this was just going to be played on your phone, or on YouTube or something, I was a little bit lazy with it, which shame on me. Let me just tell you guys where I got these sounds from. These are packs. Most of these are packs that come with Ableton. I'm on Ableton 11. And so as part of that, you see it just like gives you some free packs here that you can use without having to like go out and buy some external stuff. It's very, very good quality stuff, especially like for just coming with the software. My favorites are Brass by Spitfire, all the orchestral ones here, orchestral brass, orchestral mallets, and orchestral strings. I was downloading orchestral woodwinds. I would recommend that. It just took up a lot of space on my computer, and I don't think that I used it enough to justify it. Spitfire's upright piano is also amazing. I would just recommend, if you have one of the versions of Live that come with these packs, check them out, download them, take advantage of it, have fun, because there is some really good quality stuff here. Some of these, like this organ here, I use Garritan's Personal Orchestra 5. Aria Instruments is the plugin itself it's the player that I use to upload Garritan Personal Orchestra. This one's really good. It's only, when I bought it, this was like years ago, it was only like $150, which compared to some other orchestra VSTs, which are in the thousands, pretty okay. This, I would suggest Garritan if you're going to purchase this, as more for background instrumentation, and for very simple things, because for those kinds of things, very good, very high quality, can't complain. But for melodies, for instruments that are going to have a more prominent solo role, I would suggest looking elsewhere, because the sampling isn't as great for this plugin. But for most things, I do use Aria or Garritan Orchestra for a lot of things. I don't use it for a lot of melodic, prominent solo based stuff. So yes, if there's anything that you guys would like me to cover, any questions you might have, please go ahead and comment it. I am looking to make as much helpful content as possible. And yes, until then, I will see you. I hope this was helpful. Please have a great rest of your day. I love you. Take care. Bye-bye.